Hello, and welcome to our last set of lectures before our first online exam. Today we're talking about the immune system. So the immune system is the system that protects us against everything else. Obviously, it protects us against pathogens. So here we're looking at a virus that actually is probably a coronavirus of some type. Now, it's important to remember that coronavirus, in addition to being the thing we're scared of right now, is also a set of viruses that causes things like the common cold. The common cold can be a lot of different viruses, but coronaviruses is one of the types that can cause it. So the immune system is what keeps us safe from everything out there, pathogens, parasites, or even our own body malfunctioning, like tumor cells or toxins released by cells that are just dying normally. So that's, very important. And when we think about the immune system, there's a bunch of different pieces that we need to be thinking about. So we're going to start with this innate versus adaptive or acquired immune system. So innate, it means it doesn't matter whether your body has seen it before or not. So with the innate immune system, we start with this idea of epithelial barriers. Epithelial barriers are just the physical barriers that keep the outside out and the inside in. So your skin is obviously a really, really good and important epithelial barrier. In fact, your skin is such a good epithelial barrier that it is really, really hard for pathogens to get through your skin unless it's damaged. That's why it's so important when your skin gets cut to make sure that it's cleaned out, that it's protected, all of those things, because once that barrier is cut, it's a lot easier for pathogens to get into your body and cause an infection. Now, your mucous membranes, like in your respiratory system, in your digestive system, in your reproductive system, are a lot more penetrable, a lot easier for pathogens to get into because stuff has to get through. You've got at least mucus passing through, and depending on the mucous membrane, you may also have other stuff going in or going out. It's a lot easier for these pathogens to get through that. That's why we get so many more respiratory and digestive infections than we do skin infections. So now, let's assume for a moment that something has gotten through those barriers. Then we have to fight it off inside the body. And the ways that we do that are through our immune cells, like phagocytes and dendritic cells. Phagocytes are eating cells. So phago means eat. So cells that eat things. Dendritic cells are presenter cells. We'll talk about that more as we go on. Plasma proteins can fight this by binding to things, by blocking things. So plasma proteins can be important. And then NK cells are natural killer cells, which do exactly what they sound like. They kill other cells. So moving on from our innate immune system, we get to our acquired or adaptive immune system. Now, acquired immunity means that it's not effective the first time you encounter a pathogen, but the next time you encounter that same pathogen, your body already knows about it, knows what to do. And now, of course, part of the reason that COVID-19 right now is so scary is that our bodies haven't encountered it before. No one has immunity, except a few people who have already gotten it. So we have this problem that we need to figure out how to get immunity. And there's a few different ways we can get immunity. We can get it naturally or artificially, and we can get it actively or passively. So sort of the standard way of getting it is naturally acquired active. And that means that you've come into the contact with the pathogen before, and your body has developed an immunity to it. Now, so for example, if you got chickenpox, which probably some of you got chickenpox, most of you were probably vaccinated for it and didn't get it. But someone who did get chickenpox, like if you did or if your parents did, once they have had chickenpox, they can't get it again. Their bodies have an immunity to chickenpox. Now, on the other hand, if you got the vaccine for chickenpox, then you were exposed to something that triggered your body to react as if it had chickenpox and develop immunity to it. And of course, that's what we're trying to do with COVID, is develop a vaccine that would then let everybody get immunity to it without having to catch it to get that immunity. Now, there's also passive immunity. Naturally, this happens passing from mother to child, either across the placenta to the fetus or in breast milk. And this is one of the reasons that the very early breast milk is really important, because for the first few weeks of life, the baby really isn't making any of their own new antibodies. And so they need to get those all from the mother. And because early on they haven't been exposed to anything, this is a way they can get some of that exposure. Then we can also do this artificially. If you've heard about the idea, read any articles where they're talking about taking plasma from people who have recovered from COVID-19 and injecting it into people who are currently fighting off COVID-19. That is passive artificially acquired immunity, where we're giving them the immune serum, the antibodies directly from another person. So this is our acquired immune system. Now, looking in a little more detail at some of these, so innate immunity, we have these barrier defenses that we've been talking about. So the barrier defenses, skin, hair, mucus, things that are just physically keeping stuff out. Obviously, as we said, skin is really, really good at this, but the mucous membranes are not as good. So we've got a lot of help here. The mucus itself can actually catch a lot of pathogens, just get stuck in the mucus. And then we've got internal defenses behind that. And here we're still looking at innate immunity. We've got an inflammatory response. We've got natural killer cells. And we've the complement system, which we're still looking at inflammatory response. And then we have phagocytes, again, cells that eat other cells. So those are our monocytes, our neutrophils, and our macrophages. Then we have the adaptive immunity, which we're going to talk about more as we go on. So the leukocytes are these white blood cells, are immune cells. And we divide these into granulocytes and agranulocytes. And really that's just how they look under a microscope. Do they have granules? But these granules are actually important because these granules are little clusters of chemicals that play a role. Some of them are cytotoxic, some of them attract other cells, like there might be cytokines. You may have been hearing about something about a cytokine storm. We'll talk more about what that means. And so you've got these granules, and then you have agranulocytes. So your agranulocytes are cells that don't have granules and instead are playing other roles. And these are lymphocytes, which we'll talk about more later, and then monocytes. So your eosinophils and basophils have these granules. They release granules. That's basically what they do. They use these granules to fight things. The neutrophils are a little different. Neutrophils are phagocytes. They go around, they eat other cells, and in doing so, they frequently wind up sort of losing the fight. And so they try and eat something, they may kill it, but they die in the process. And when they die, they release these granules, which then attract other immune cells to come help them in the fight. Monocytes are another set of our phagocytes. They also go around and eat potential pathogens. They do not release granules in the same way, but they often survive longer and can phagocytize more things. So how does phagocytosis work? What happens when a phagocyte eats something? So it will come across a microbe or some other particle and create an invagination in the cell membrane and adhere to that microbe and invaginate that space. It will then become a vesicle that floats around in the cell. And that will bind with a lysozyme, creating a phagolysozyme. So this phagolysosome. And this phagolysosome is then going to destroy that microbe and digest it, leaving a little residual body with indigestible material, which will then be discharged, but that can also be presented, which we'll talk about later, as to other cells to say, hey, this is a thing, I destroyed it, is it important? We'll talk about that more in adaptive immunity. Now, natural killer cells are the one that we haven't talked about. So natural killer cells look for MHC1. MHC is called the major histocompatibility complex. So major histocompatibility complex, every cell in your body produces this. And every person, has their MHC. And the natural killer cell just goes around and says, do you produce this? Great, you do. Okay, we're going on. Now, if it encounters something that is not producing MHC, then it's going to destroy that cell. Now, that might be a virus-infected cell. Virus-infected cells stop producing MHC as a signal to the body that they need to be destroyed. It could also be a cell that is not from your own body. So anything that is recognized as not yours because of this lack of MHC is going to be killed by the natural killer cells. Obviously, this is particularly important for viral infections, but it can also be relevant for like animal parasites and things like that. So the way that this happens is the natural killer cell responds to two things here, the activation receptor and the inhibitory receptor. As long as it gets the right inhibitory receptor, everything's fine. If you don't get that right inhibitory receptor from MHC, then it will release granules, cytotoxic granules, cell-killing granules, and destroy this target cell. So in the case of a virus-infected cell, it's going to cause that cell to self-destruct and destroy those viruses inside instead of releasing them to spread to other cells. All right, that brings us to the end of the first part of our immune system video.